Wesath Halle Aihwar, as once said my ancient ancestors. DayVeeJay here. I hope you all had a great Christmas and New Year. And as I said in my review of Independence Day, I've had comments suggesting that in my reviews and retrospectives, I give the games a rating at the end. So while you all wait for my next review, I thought I'd do a summary of all the games I've looked at during my first year here on YouTube and what I thought of them. And since tier lists is the popular thing right now, I thought we'd do that. So without any further delay, let's just get right into it. Alright, so we've got our tier list set up, we've got our games down here. We're just going to use the standard grading system, A down to F. I've just got the basic grades, but I'll specify whether I think a game deserves a plus or a minus as we go. I think we'll go in alphabetical order, so that way we get a good mix of grades. So, let's go. First up we have A Bug's Life. And you know, this really was a shame, because it actually started out pretty well and had some good ideas, like with the berries and stuff. But they kinda just relied too much on that to the point where it gets really tedious, where you're just picking up these berries and moving them around all over the place. And the last few levels got really annoying, and it was to the point where I really just wanted to be done with it. So yeah, doesn't sound great, does it? Although I don't think I can give it a really low grade because it does have some good things going for it. I like the graphics and the soundtrack and some of the level design, and it's at least playable, so I think I'll give it a C. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. Next up we've got Action Man Operation Extreme. Ho ho, Action Man, staple of my childhood. For anyone who doesn't know, Action Man was basically the British version of G.I. Joe. From what I understand, Hasbro wanted to sell G.I. Joe in the UK, but since G.I. is American military slang, they thought British kids wouldn't know what it meant and be put off, so they renamed him Action Man in the UK. But yeah, Action Man was everywhere when I was growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s. Like I said in the video, you could barely turn on the telly without seeing adverts for new figures, and that was pretty much all I would ask for birthdays and Christmases and what have you. So yeah, I played the shit out of this game as a kid, and actually remember liking it a lot. But Jesus, it hasn't aged well. And to be honest, looking back on it now, it's actually pretty shit. I mean, it's not that long when you think about it. You've just got the 3 vehicle missions, which are only there just to show off all the vehicle toys, cause yeah, this game is pretty much just a big toy commercial. And then there's the 3 on foot missions, which are all long as fuck just to drag out the game and make it seem longer than it actually is. And it just gets so fucking boring. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And the combat isn't very exciting, and then it's constantly pausing itself to tell you what to do because the game thinks you're a fucking dumbass. And it's just so tedious and annoying. So yeah, I'm leaning towards a D with this one. But I don't know if my soft spot for Action Man is making me want to have mercy on it. I mean, it's not terrible. The vehicle missions were kind of fun, even though they were pretty annoying as well because they control like shit. And it had its moments. I don't know, I think I'll give it a very generous C-, but that's probably based more on nostalgia than anything else. And next it's Ape Escape. Oh yeah, we're getting serious now. Probably the most important game here, which I'm surprised more people don't talk about anymore. The first game to use the DualShock controller. And I've just got to say that I love this game. I had a really good time revisiting this one and can easily see myself coming back and playing it again just for fun. I loved all the DualShock stuff and the way it was implemented with the gadgets and how varied it makes the gameplay. I like the level design, the characters, I love the soundtrack. I think it's one of my favourites out of all these games. So yeah, I love this game and recommend anyone who hasn't played it to give it a go. And any criticisms I did have with it I think were just little things and nitpicks. So yeah, I think I've got to give this one an A+ for Ape Escape. Man, they've really got to do a remake on PS5 with the new DualSense stuff. That'd be fucking class. Oh, and just as an aside, in my review when I'm talking about all the other stuff Sony did over the years with the DualShock, like with the daft fucking motion sensitive stuff and the touchpad and shit, I said that the DualSense was probably just going to be another daft gimmick or something, but at the time I didn't have a PS5 and I never played one, but since then I've actually gotten myself one, and I've just got to say, yeah, I take back what I said about the DualSense. I love all the haptic feedback and sensory stuff and the triggers that resist you. I think it really does enhance the gaming experience and has the potential to be a real game changer. For pretty much the whole first week when I got it, all I played was just Astro's Playroom. It was that good. I'd love to see more games implemented properly so it can be used to its fullest potential. SpiderMan 2 had a bit, but I think it could have done more. I mean, just imagine if they have all that stuff in fucking GTA 6. Like, I don't know, the controller vibrates differently for different guns, or you can feel it when you run over pedestrians. You know that big beach scene in the teaser? Just imagine driving along that beach, running people down, and you can actually feel them bouncing off the hood. That'd be fucking class. But anyway. Then next we've got Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, the first game I did a review on and the first game I ever played. I was surprised when I read it came out in 1999, I thought it was older than that. But yeah, I might be a little biased because it does hold a special place in my heart, but when I went back to it, it played pretty much the same as I remembered. I love the level and character design, I like that you've got quite a few abilities, and there's a good mix of challenges that keep it from becoming repetitive, even if the platforming is fairly standard. I like the art style, the sound design and soundtrack, and how it makes you feel like you're actually playing through a classic Looney Tunes cartoon. And again, I think a lot of the criticisms I had with it were just minor things. So yeah, I kinda want to give it an A, but I think that's probably me being biased because of what it means to me. But if I think more objectively, I'd probably lean more towards a B. I mean, it's good, it's a fun game, I'd recommend it to anyone, but I don't think it really does anything that we haven't seen before. I think to get an A, you've got to be ambitious or do something really innovative, like what Ape Escape did, and it just doesn't really do that. It does what we've seen in a lot of other games, but does it really well. So yeah, I don't think I can give it an A, but I'll give it a very respectable B+. Again, B for Bugs Bunny. And now we have another Pixar-based game from Traveller's Tales with Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. I don't know, I guess they must have had the contract back then or something. But yeah, this game's a bit of a mystery. I mean, it just feels funny calling it a racing game even though that's really what it is. And you can't really call it a shooter even though it's got shooting in it because it just doesn't factor in enough. And you can't call it a platformer either for the same reason. It's just a weird game with a daft premise. I still don't know what they were thinking with that shit. Was that really the best they could come up with? But anyway, it's just a pretty nothing game. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's definitely not great either. It's playable, but it's really short and easy. You could probably get through it in a couple hours, even while it's forcing you to replay levels you've already beaten just to drag itself out. So yeah, there's not a lot to recommend it. I think I've got to give it a D. Next up is Croc Legend of the Gobbos. Oh my god, this fucking game nearly drove me to fucking murder. I seriously had no idea it was going to be that hard when I decided to do a video on it. And I'm sure I played it as a kid, but I certainly don't remember anything like this. But yeah, this game's hard as balls, mostly because of the controls. I'm serious when I say they're the worst out of anything I've seen so far. They're just so heavy it feels like driving a fucking tank, and it's just so hard to jump and land where you want to. And then you get killed just by touching an enemy and have to go back to the start of the level every time unless you find a checkpoint, and then you've only got 3 lives which you can easily lose in one single bit. It's fucking crazy. And again, like I said, I don't mind hard games. I just hate when they're hard because of things like bad controls or fucked up game design. And that's pretty much where most of the challenge comes from here. It's just such a frustrating game that drove me fucking nuts. And I admit I actually had to use passwords to get through the last few levels, because it was just taking so fucking long. I was thinking, fuck, I'm gonna be stuck here forever, and I'm not gonna get the fucking video done. But at the same time, I kind of have a soft spot for it, just because of how cute and lovable Croc is. Like I said, he's probably the only reason why I don't flat out hate this game. But there are a couple other things I liked. The graphics were really good for the time, and I loved the soundtrack. I don't know, just because of how bad the controls are and how much they drag the game down and make it a lot less fun than it could have been, I'm leaning towards a D. But again, just because of how endearing Croc himself is, I think I'll be nice and give it a generous C. It's above Action Man because, I don't know, at least it wasn't boring or just a glorified toy commercial. And next, also from the makers of Croc, we have Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, aka the Sorcerer's Stone in the US. Yeah, I think this one was pretty good, at least it controlled better. What I actually didn't realise and maybe should have mentioned in my review is I think the game's actually based on the book instead of the film. I went back and read the book and there's stuff in the game that's not in the film where I was like, what the fuck did they do that for? But turns out it was in the book, like some of the challenges when you're going after the Philosopher's Stone, and the final battle with Voldemort is more like in the book, but it still looks a lot like the film, so I'm guessing they must have had access to production images or something. But yeah, I like the way the castle and the world looks. It does look like what you'd expect it to. I like the lessons and how it's kind of semi-open world. There's bits where you can just wander around and explore, and there's even some side activities you can do, so it does kind of feel like a sort of precursor to Hogwarts Legacy. I love how fucked up the story is. I was serious when I said if you've never read the book or seen the film, you'll have no idea what's going on. The whole first half is just mostly you going around doing random stuff that has nothing to do with the actual story, like getting seeds for Hagrid, and then out of nowhere Hermione's just like, I know where the stolen thing is. And then you've got all the pointless time challenges like the obstacle courses. I still don't know what the point of that shit was. But despite all that, the game is fun, for the most part. I mean, there were a few bits that were pretty annoying, like the timed challenges, the minecart bit, the flying and Quidditch bits haven't aged very well, and the fucking troll chase, even though that was a fucking glitch or something, I still don't know what the fuck happened there. But in spite of all that, I still think it's a decent game, at least for the time, so I don't know, I think it's worth a B, so that's where we'll put it. And next, I think we can all guess where this one's going. Yes, I've got a special little place just for you. Yeah, this is going straight into F. It's by far the worst game I've looked at so far doing these videos, and one of, if not the worst game I've ever played in general. It doesn't feel good to play, it's not fun to play, it's boring, repetitive, annoying, it's just the same thing over and over again, and I'm so glad that I never have to touch it again. So yeah, that's why it gets an F. But you know, while I was writing the script, I did take a look at a few Let's Plays to see if other people were having the same experience as me. And I actually saw comments from people saying that they remember owning this game and had good memories of playing it. And all I can say is, Jesus fucking Christ, were we playing the same fucking game? Because if I played this shit as a kid, I know I wouldn't have good memories of it. But also, just seeing a game often isn't enough to tell you how bad it is. You actually have to play it and feel it for yourself. Like when I was editing the video, I admit I couldn't help but wonder if the game was as bad as I was making it out to be. I'd be watching footage of my gameplay and be thinking, you know, this doesn't look that bad. But then I'd give the game another go and straight away I'd be like, oh god, yeah, this is horse shit. And it's not like this game was good when it first came out and just didn't age well, cause it wasn't. It didn't get good reviews back then either. So yeah, just fuck this game. Next, and oh look, another game from Radical Entertainment. Well, at least they did a better job with this one. So like I say in my review, I used to love watching Jackie Chan as a kid, so I couldn't believe I missed out on this when I found out about it, cause it would have been right up my street. Yeah, this game's a blast. It's got a good mix of beat 'em up style combat and platforming. You've got a good range of moves, although it is a bit disappointing that you don't unlock any new techniques or anything, so it does eventually get repetitive. The platforming's pretty standard, and it does get hard as fuck later on, and the boss fights are shit. But I love the graphics and the soundtrack, and it's just a really fun game that again, I can see myself coming back to just for fun. So yeah, this is another one I recommend if you haven't tried it. But again, I don't think I can give it an A because it doesn't do anything you haven't seen in other games of this genre. So I think I'll give it a B. I was surprised while writing the script for this one. I looked up reviews of the game and apparently it didn't do so well when it first came out. So that was a shock. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not terrible either, or even bad. I think it's really good. So not sure what their problems were. But anyway. Next up is Small Soldiers, my first review that started to get me a bit more attention. Yeah, this game's pretty good. I was actually surprised to find that so many people remember Small Soldiers. I mean, it was a decent film, but it's no secret that it was just meant to ride off the success of Toy Story, and it never really went anywhere after that. But yeah, apparently a lot of people still like it, and the game as well, based on the comments, even though it's obviously just a quick little tie-in for the film just to make a bit more money off it. But it was actually really fun despite how simple it is. I mean, all you're doing is just going around shooting bad guys, and your main objective in every mission, I think, is just to destroy something. Just like Independence Day now that I think about it, but at least in this game it was fun. I wasn't much a fan of the art style, every mission is just mostly the same dull grey or brown, but I appreciate how they didn't try to make a really contrived version of the film and decided to make it its own thing. Again, it's really simple and doesn't do anything that we haven't seen before, and I feel like it should be a C-tier game, but I just had so much fun with it, and if I remember correctly, I think most of the criticisms I had were just minor things. So yeah, I think that's enough to bump it up to a B-, so there you go. And now it's on to Spider-Man. Oh yeah, I fucking loved this game as a kid, and to be honest, it holds up pretty well. It's a lot of fun, the web swinging's good, the combat's fun even though it does become repetitive. I like the graphics and the character designs even though it's a bit weird when they talk but their lips aren't moving. Yeah, that really takes you out of it. There are a couple annoying things, like the camera and how you can't really control it yourself, and there's a few bits that I really hated, like that stupid underwater tunnel bit. But yeah, I think this one's really good. I think I'll give it an A, considering it was kind of innovative given it was the first Spider-Man game in 3D and pulls it off really well, and it's just a great game that I really enjoyed revisiting. And that brings us on to Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, my most popular video and the first one to blow up, at least a little bit. Hopefully it won't be the last. As I said in the video, I never actually played this one as a kid. I heard about it a few times, but by then there were already things like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans on PS2, so I just never bothered coming back to it. I mean, I probably would have liked it, but now, it's just not as good as the first one, even though it's virtually the same game. Gameplay wise, it's almost identical, and the things it does add are so minor that they barely make a difference. Like, you can get a few different types of web and you can go down the street a few times, but that's it really. And then it just gets really fucking hard. Some bits are absolutely hated, like when you're trying to stop the plane or when you're climbing up those long shafts, and the boss fights were a lot more frustrating. There were just so many bits that were just not very fun to play. The story's not as good, not that the first one was brilliant, but it was still better. The voice acting's cringy as fuck, the music wasn't that great. So yeah, this really was a step down from the first one, but it still had some good things, so I can't put it really low. I think it deserves a C. It's okay, it has some good moments, but I just didn't find it as fun as the first one. Although, I don't know if it's quite as bad as I made out in the review. To be honest, I kind of feel a little bad about that video, even though I do like it. I really did go a bit overboard with the swearing. I even had a couple comments asking if I can go like 10 seconds without saying the F word. Yeah, it did get a bit ridiculous. That always happens. Even though the videos are scripted and I am, I suppose, acting, I am still channeling the emotions I felt when I was playing the game, so the way I'm speaking is genuinely how I felt at the time. I just don't realise how much I swear until I go back and watch the finished video, and then I'm like, oh, this is a bit much. Which I'm probably gonna have to work on in future when I'm eventually trying to get monetized, if I get that far. But anyway, that's Spider-Man 2. And now we're getting into the final stretch with Spyro the Dragon. I don't really remember the first Spyro that much from when I was a kid. I know I had it, I just don't recall it all that well. But like I said in the video, I think Spyro was one of the big staples of PlayStation back in the day, and I think this first adventure holds up pretty well. It still feels good to play, even if the controls are a bit clunky now. I love that kind of heavy and floaty feel they have. I don't think I've come across another game that feels quite like it. The progression's a bit simplistic and repetitive, like all you've got to do is make it to the end of each level while rescuing a few dragons along the way. I don't even think you have to rescue that many, you just need a few to move between worlds and then you need to find gems and dragon eggs and shit. And the boss fights are a total waste, even the final boss. They're barely even boss fights, they're just regular levels where you're chasing some weird guy around who you just have to flame a couple times. But despite that, I do love this game and think it was pretty innovative for the time. Like back then, most other platformers had tight corridor style layouts, but I think this was one of the first to have wide open style levels. But I still don't think it really does enough. I think they played it pretty safe with it being the first one, and it's pretty simple overall, so I don't think I can give it an A, but it's worth a solid B+. And then it's straight into the sequel. And this is the Spyro game that I have the most memories of, and I think this is where the series and character really came into their own. I love this game. With this one, they took the first game and improved on it in just about every way you can think of. There's a better story with more going on, more interesting worlds to explore, you've got new abilities like swimming and climbing, they added all the new mini games and side activities, and there's a pretty good mix so they never really get repetitive, and the boss fights are actually boss fights now. The graphics are great, the music's great, the level design's great. Yeah, I can think of very few criticisms, and even then they're probably just nitpicks. In my opinion, this is what a sequel should be. It improves on the original in every way and adds lots of new stuff, and it's just such a fun game. I think this is the Spyro game to really hit the A category, so yeah, I'm giving it an A+. And now it's time for the end of the trilogy with Year of the Dragon. Again, I don't have that many memories of this one from when I was a kid, except for the fact that I owned it. But I think this one's great as well. I think it's pretty clear that there wasn't much further they could go after Spyro 2. That's why the big thing with this one is the new characters you play as. Because aside from them, it's pretty much the same game, but it's still better than Spider-Man 2 because at least these changes made a substantial difference, and all the new characters have different abilities that make them feel unique. There's lots of new and fun side activities like the skateboarding, the new speedways, the levels where you play as Sparks. It just seems they were like, okay, this is going to be the end of the trilogy, let's go all out and give the player as much bang for their buck as possible. I guess this was kind of like the San Andreas of the Spyro universe. And on top of that, we've got all the other stuff like the graphics, the music, the level and character design, the story, all of which are great. Although I don't think it's quite as good as Spyro 2. I believe in my review I referred to it as the Return of the Jedi to Spyro 2's The Empire Strikes Back. A great game in its own right, but just not quite as good as its predecessor. In spite of the new characters, it kind of feels a bit samey. Spyro himself doesn't get any new abilities, and playing as him doesn't feel any different. But it's still a great game and worthy of the A category, so I'll give it an A. And now we come to Tomorrow Never Dies, the first of 2 Bond games on this list. This is another one that I remember enjoying quite a lot as a kid, but hasn't aged all that well. This was the first Bond game after GoldenEye 007, and I guess cause that one did so well, they wanted to do something different to stand out from its shadow, so they went third person instead, although that wasn't enough to save it. The controls and movement are pretty clunky, the shooting's not very intuitive. All I can say is thank fucking god there's automatic targeting, otherwise you'd probably not be able to hit a fucking barn door in this game. There's levels that encourage you to be stealthy, but the controls and AI are too shit to handle it, so it's impossible to sneak around without getting caught. There were some cool set pieces like the skiing bits and the driving level, and I liked the music, but that's still not enough to save it. So yeah, again, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. It had some fun moments, it's just kind of mediocre. I think it's worth a C-. And second from last, we have Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. I remember playing this one a lot as a kid, and I think it holds up pretty well. It's a fun little platformer. I like the sandbox style levels where you have to explore to find objectives to complete, even if it doesn't make much sense from a narrative point of view. It controls pretty well, you've got a good range of abilities, the graphics are really good for the time. I really love how detailed the environments are, they do a good job of capturing the look of the film. It does have a few flaws, like throwing you back to the start menu and making you load the game when you lose all your lives, and the camera can be a bit difficult at times, and the objectives do get repetitive, but on the whole it's a decent game, so yeah, I think this one deserves a B. And finally we have The World's Not Enough, our second Bond game. This was made by the same people who did Tomorrow Never Dies, and if I had to guess, I'd say that since that didn't do very well with going third person after GoldenEye 007, they decided to go back to first person since it did so well before. The problem is that The World's Not Enough just isn't as good as GoldenEye 007. The movement and combat's really clunky, although I did like the sort of cover system they had where you could lean out of cover in sniper mode. The levels are mostly the same, just go here, shoot these guys and repeat. Although they did try a few different things with the casino mission, and the one where you're sneaking around the mansion. Too bad they were shit, just boring and annoying. The music was bland and forgettable, the voice acting wasn't great, the graphics aren't that impressive, and of course they fucked up the inventory system from Tomorrow Never Dies. That was one of the few good things that game had going for it. It was quick and easy to use, but for some unknown reason they were just like, nah, we've got to get rid of that shit, and they made it so now you have to pause the game and go through menus and shit to select what weapon or gadget you want, and it just makes things more annoying than they have to be. So yeah, this just seems like a step down from a game that wasn't even that good in its own right. And this was another one where the further I got, the more I just wanted to be done with it. So yeah, this one gets a D. It's pretty bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as fucking Independence Day, so at least it's got that going for it. And well, that's our tier list. That was pretty fun. I think we've got a good mix of grades here. I hope this satisfies everyone who wanted me to grade the games. I don't think I'll give grades in the individual reviews going forward, instead I think I'll save it and do another tier list this time next year. I don't think it's that necessary to give a grade at the end of the review. I think I make it pretty clear what I think about a game and whether or not it's good or bad. So yeah, thank you very much for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then leave a like. If you didn't, then tell me to go fuck myself. I have a new review in the works that should be up soon, so keep an eye out for that. As always, thank you so much to everyone who subscribed, and if you haven't yet, I'll be extremely grateful if you would do so. Once again, I hope you all had a great Christmas and New Year's, and I'll see you again soon.